don't talk politics with you guys. I don't talk politics with you guys, not because I don't like it. I actually really enjoy politics. I don't talk politics. I don't want to get in an argument. I don't want to offend you. Like, those opinions shouldn't go back and forth. We're fight fans, right? We can all agree on that, so let's just keep it on fight fans. There's a relevance, though, to politics, because ultimately, you're gaining without throwing punches. You're in a knockdown, drag-out fight. But you're doing it in headlines, and you're doing it verbally, and you're trying to be one step wits-wise ahead of the other guy. You're never going to punch him, and you're never going to kick them. But ultimately, you are going to gain the number one thing that you need, the mandate of the masses, which is you. You cannot move a needle, and you cannot do anything. You can't get signed to the organization without it, to some degree. You will not be on a main card without it, to some degree. You will not come up that card without it, to a degree. And we can all understand that, right? We all really get that. And there is a massive push and pull right now at 185 pounds, but there's one thing that's left out. What does Sean Strickland want to do? It is the only question that hasn't been asked. And believe me, I've seen a number of scumbags, and I'm sure that you guys aren't, that piling on Israel Adesanya, which has really been a surprise to me. I mean, I've heard things like he was never very good in the first place. He doesn't deserve a rematch. And deserve a rematch is a really weird point. I don't know whoever taught you that word deserve or where you think that's going to come in life. I really don't know who did that. They did you a tremendous disservice. But moreover, if you do want to talk about deserving, then you want to talk about numbers and you want to put the champion against the number one ranked guy. Right? Of course you do. So if you're Izzy and you were the champion and you've beaten everybody else, even if you lose to Sean, you fall to what? From champion, you fall to what? When you fall, what do you fall to? You fall to number one. You go from champion to number one. So if you put number one against the champion, then of course he deserves a rematch. I mean, it's just like a level of stupidity that I can't stand. It's been asked of everybody. Been asked of Izzy, who dropped a mic at a press conference. Rolled out with his crew. It's been asked of Dana White. I have come out and told you as clearly as I know how to speak that the announcement that Chimaev versus Paulo Costa is going to be for number one contenders match. But we're all just guessing. Dricus du Plessis went on Ariel's show. He didn't call for it. He actually called for a fight with Izzy. I respected it tremendously. But one thing, I'm just sharing all these different guys. Robert Whitaker, very charming, a wonderful guy. Robert Whitaker did a piece as early as this morning. And he talked all about the fight. And he talked about what he thought went wrong. But what nobody has asked is what would Sean Strickland like? And why do I compare that to politics? Why? Because you can manipulate it. You can manipulate it through the voice and the mandate of the most important thing, which is the masses, which is you guys. Now, everybody knows who's who. You get a room full of fighters together and you could have them work out. You could run a practice for an hour. At the end of the hour, everybody in there will know who's number one, who's number two, and number three. Even if they never touch each other, they could be on separate sides of the room. If they're all work out together, they'll all know. You could get a room full of fighters together and you could play music as they all sit there on their iPhones. 1 hour later, everybody in that room will know who the baddest dude is. Sean Strickland has one job right now. It's the same job of every champion, to fight the easiest opponent for the most money. Sean Strickland, little known fact, actually has a few friends in this sport. One of them is named Khamzat Chimaev. They've also trained together, and they've worked out together, and there's interviews that Sean has done with the Schmo specifically talking about those workouts. And you're not going to get the fine print on it, and you're not going to get Chimaev to come out and speak about it because they're friendly, and that's just not the way that it works. But at the end of the day, you do know who you want matched up with, and you don't know who you don't. I'm not attempting to speak for Sean. What I'm attempting to speak for is if, by example, Sean was not as interested in the outcome of Paulo Costa and Khamzat Chimaev, as is getting ready to be announced. It is crystal clear to Stevie Wonder that the outcome of that match is going to be directly related to who Sean fights next. Unless Sean gets in front of it. Just by example, I'm making an example. If Sean gets in front of it and says, I'm not interested. That's my training. I fought him 100 times and we did it for free, right? I mean, Sean's not going to, Sean's got too much pride. Sean's not going to do that. I'm attempting to prove the point for you. Then a million people want to know what Dana wants to know. They want to know what Izzy wants to do. And you're getting Duplessis to weigh in. You're having Chael come over and tell you this. And Whitaker's weighing in on it. Everything's been talked about except to ask Sean, who would you like to fight next? Would you like to return the favor? Would you like to fight Adesanya? Except this time, we don't do it in Australia. This time, we do it in Las Vegas. I mean, like, this is promotion 101, right? I mean, we don't do it at 185 pounds. We do it at 184 pounds. Or we do it in a ring instead of a cage. Or we put a coal miner's glove on the top of it. And the first one to get to the ladder and to climb up to the top. Like, I mean, you can do anything you want with it. But you're going to have a very hard sell. You're not going to have a hard time selling the idea that Adesanya deserves it. You're not going to have a hard time selling the idea that Adesanya falls from champion to number one. You're not even going to have a hard time explaining that he has an off night the same as everybody else. You're not going to have a hard time with any of those things. You're going to have a hard time explaining why you're not doing the fight in Australia, which gave Adesanya, at least in your perception, an advantage. So here we have Sean Strickland that won a fight 4 rounds to 1. And now we're going to do the same fight, but we're going to do it in Las Vegas where Strickland lives. He's going to return the favor. We're going to do it at his home and give him an advantage. You don't give an advantage to the guy that just won 4 rounds to 1. You got to give advantage to the other guy or you don't have a story to tell. Which in lies the problem. Which in lies one of the top reasons that it's likely to not be Adesanya next. Now, I'm not here to speak on that. What I'm here to speak on is the fact that Sean can manipulate that single-handedly. Sean came out and said, I felt like he didn't try. He wasn't as good as my bad sparring partners. That's powerful stuff. I mean, that really is very interesting stuff. Israel Adesanya is a nasty guy. He is a very, very good fighter. And Chris Curtis came out. He had a very interesting take on this. I talk about Sean Strickland. Surprisingly, he's got some friends. Well, Chris Curtis happens to be one of them. Chris said, you know what? He said, everybody that ever comes in our gym, he said, I've watched Sean go with 100 different people. He said, everybody that's ever come in our gym, their first time going with him, they got their ass kicked that bad. So the second day, Sean is still beat him, but they go closer. And the third day, Sean is still win, but they go even closer. And I'm changing some of the words if you saw Curtis's interview. The point is he was very complimentary to his teammate. But he did make a point that he's got an awkward style. So, guys come in, they got one time to deal with this. You don't really see it on TV. He looks like he's by the numbers. He's not. He's very awkward. And I thought that was a really interesting take. I thought that was a really helpful take. And I do think Adesanya figured some things out. And I do think Adesanya deserves the match, whatever that word means. I think Adesanya's likely contender to get the match. But I don't know if he's the most likely contender. And if Sean really believes that was him at his best, or at least close thereto, and he did have a little bit of an advantage considering he, meaning Izzy, knew when the fight was going to be. He knew that he was going to fight. And I found out 6 weeks ago and had to board a plane after getting a training camp in this Crocodile Dundee hat. I'm going to take those advantages that he had, no matter how much they were an advantage, they were still advantage. I'm going to take those away, and my 4-1 is going to become 6-1 in a 5-round fight. I mean, right, like if it's something like this, that's who he should go after. There was going to be no problem. He could get in front of it. He could be the noble man. You know what, guys? I've heard all the comments made online. I've even heard you naysayers say that Izzy doesn't deserve it. By God, he did me a favor. I'm now a millionaire, and you better bet your ass I'm going to return it. That's the kind of guy I refuse to fight anybody else. Because I do the right thing. And I am going to return the favor. You're stuck. You are stuck 100 different ways. Whenever the champion calls for the fight, it's a powerful thing. When a champion calls for the hardest fight he can find, you are now done. You're done. It's been tested. It's been tested. How else do you explain Yoel Romero off of a loss versus Israel Adesanya? Well, you got a Cuban Olympic wrestling medalist versus a tall, skinny kickboxer from New Zealand. Wherever in the world New Zealand is, that's how you explain it. And that's how they did explain it. They said, man, this is the fight he wanted. That's the hardest fight I can imagine. How do I tell him no? So if you have a champion in Sean Strickland who calls out the number one guy, calls out the record setter, calls out the GOAT. It doesn't matter if he just beat him. It doesn't matter if it's 4-1. None of those things matter. If Sean calls for the fight, that's the fight. And it's a very interesting concept. When a blind man can see the outcome to Paulo Costa versus Chimaev is going to be related to Sean, unless Sean wants to come in and spoil the party, which he's got the right to do. You got checkers and you got chess. You can see the boards. You know what pieces they're doing. Is that the match you want or isn't it? Do you not care? Do you really not care? I mean, I know it's one thing to say you don't care, but do you actually not care? Why would you not care? You want to fight your friend? Is that no big deal to you? Fight with me. You want to fight that guy specifically? Is that no big deal to you? Fight with me. You trained with that guy. How did it feel? By the way, he was 170 pounds now. Now he's going to be up 20 pounds. So throw everything you know about him out the window and just know that however it did, it gives an advantage to him. It's all fine with me. It's not my point at all. My point is, when everything's going nice and smooth and you think you got it all figured out, the one thing that you haven't asked is of Sean Strickland, what do you want to do? And as much as you might think that answer doesn't matter, there are certain rules that can't be broken. If the champion calls for a fight, it matters. If the champion calls for the number one ranked guy, the fight's done. If the champion calls for the hardest guy in the division, the fight's done. There is no exception. You will not go out in history and find an exception for me where the number one guy and the absolute best guy is called for by the champion and they go to number 3. You won't find an example. You will find bad negotiating. You'll find rotten managers. You'll find reasons you did it. Not when everybody is willing. You will not find an example throughout history where the promoter didn't sign off because he was forced to sign off. Sean Strickland has that power. Sean Strickland can paint him into a corner. I don't know if he cares to. But I do think it's a valid question. You're asking everybody else what they think about it. You've left out one guy. You've never asked Sean.